Alright guys, I'm Taylor Westbrook from By The Brook Tempeh. I'm here to talk to you guys for the Food Justice weekend. And my topic is on fermentation on wheels, which I've taken tempeh and put it into a trailer. I have my friend Casey here that we thought we would have a little Q&A and just have a conversation about this topic. Hope you enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to finally get the chance to sit down and ask you these things that I always am thinking about but never really have a chance to ask you. So, this is cool. Um and I guess my first question is how did you get into this business? What led you to this point and why fermentation?
Yeah, I think the first place to start is since I was like 22, so about 9 years ago, I started focusing on food, got into restaurants and the kitchen, realized that it was something I wanted to do, but over time, once I found fermentation shortly thereon after, started to realize that I would love to do something for myself and for the community. And probably about like 4 years ago, really started vibing with the idea that I would love to create a fermentation business and a livelihood off of it. And took about 2 years to find tempeh, and through that exploration, really found this niche while working in kitchens still. And COVID, I think, honestly, was a place that showed me a place to change, and there was a transition point that just kind of naturally happened because I was spending a year before COVID really came to be on just testing out these ideas and what a
Mhm.
trailer would look like, how do I bring a business to my house.
Hmm.
So there was probably a year of just working at my last job, just envisioning how this could really come to be.
Mhm. Right. And when you finally decided to make the leap what were the goals that you set for yourself and yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest goal was to figure out what my capacity could be in a small trailer. My trailer is 6 by 12. I have a small fermenter as well.
Mhm.
And like a lot of my questions and a lot of my pursuits was how can I make the best tempeh possible with the least amount of space. So figuring that out was probably the biggest goal and challenge.
Mhm.
Um, Other goals were really figuring out how I could create a home lifestyle with this craft, how it could translate well into just my day-to-day life, which
Mhm.
I never imagined or really knew how to do. So that was more of surrendering to just the big change and transition this past spring.
Mhm.
And naturally that, I think, informed itself to be a goal of how to like maintain this, how to still be creative when it's just me
Mhm.
and the community around me that I get to ask questions and get advice and inspiration, but really trying to figure out how do I keep motivating myself and figuring out how to create the best tempeh with limited space.
Mhm. Yeah. And I know that you just started selling at two farmers markets in the area, and I'm wondering, as on top of that, what do you see as the future of the business and this model that you have?
Yeah, I think the future to me feels like community scale fermentation.
Mm.
That I think there's a lot of great brands and companies out there that are doing nationwide things or like pretty big regional distribution. I think back to the goals question too is really like how can I be influential to the community, create this beautiful product without burning myself out or
Mhm.
without um, surrendering myself to big retail distribution that asks for demand and really fits like a model of capitalism and wanting you to produce more and more,
Yeah.
where community scale really takes it back and shows you how to create a lifestyle or really create some ritual around the thing that you love to do
Mm.
and gradually grow. And
Yeah, I really am appreciating. I didn't understand all of the intentionality in the approach that you took, and this community scale is really kind of inspiring a lot. And I wonder if there's any more about food justice that you want to name that, yeah, is on your mind about this project?
Yeah, I think this theme of food justice and the way I interpret that for myself, which might not be everybody else in the community or other business owners, is really um, how to stay small, but how to still stay vibrant with what you're doing, and how to hopefully invest in the time that other people can see what you're doing, so that hopefully it, kind of permeates out and other people get inspired. And my food justice role, I guess, is introducing a product that a lot of people aren't familiar with, that I think can radically shape people like carnivores' diets. I think it can really show a different way of eating plant-based food, eating fermented food, and hopefully show people that this can improve their diets while mirroring things that feel not so foreign to them, like meat. And not that meat's bad, but it's great to mix things up. And I think tempeh is a great example of being able to do that, especially fresh, unpasteurized tempeh, which in itself seems to be a rapidly moving movement within the fermentation world.
Yeah, that's rad. So, how did you go from like this idea to actually building these 2 trailers behind us?
Yeah, really assessing out like my site and where I live right now. I think that's like the first spot you have to start is like, do you have relationships already where you live? Maybe you live on a farm, maybe it's an urban setting. So like knowing your location, I think will take you to a place of asking the right questions, and also probably finding friends and neighbors that can, support you. I think doing this or what I'm doing in trailers might not mirror somebody in a city setting, but there might be somebody in your community that has a farm nearby that you can utilize their land and drive 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and you build a relationship with that person and can set up shop there. So it's like first assessing where do you live, who's around you that can help. And the other big tool for me was a contractor and a close friend that was able to do a lot of this DIY retrofitting. That's another area that if you can do it yourself, then more the merrier to you. But if you can find a close friend or an acquaintance that can be affordable and willing to help, that will, I think, speed up the pace of really imagining this dream and manifesting it. And then I think in terms of like rules and regulations, figuring out who your inspector is for your county, understanding the pressures on that level, which there's a lot of information on government websites that will steer you to who your inspector would be, and kind of what your food product would fall under, what category. And those end up steering you how you would set up your trailer, and give you more questions about what to do or what not to do. And lastly, I think the other huge part is researching to figure out what type of structure. I know this topic's really around a trailer, but there are, like woman or man caves that are like these sheds that you can get financing for. I specifically looked at things called food trailers or food concessions on Facebook Marketplace. And I probably did that for like 9 months straight, hunting for different versions. And I used those titles specifically because they aren't food trucks. And they end up being more things where people were doing like shaved ice or like things on induction burners, so that there's not like fryer grease or huge hood fans. I've tried to make everything with induction, which has lowered the cost to not introduce expensive things like a hood fan. So I got a bare bones trailer, and there's a lot of options right now on things like Marketplace and Craigslist. Sadly, with a lot of places closing, I mean, there's a lot of things out on the market now that it just takes time and continually looking for them. And that ultimately will steer you, I think, to how you mirror the product you want to create in your trailer or your shed, into the business that's right for you and right for your site and right for your community.
Yep. And like, what about funding? How did you deal with that?
Yeah, I think in my case, I was lucky enough to have a little bit of savings. Kind of took the angel money approach where I reached out to specific friends, mentors, and family, and gathered up enough resources to get, the first wave started, which allowed me to start selling tempeh at a smaller scale that I am now, which also generated income. For me, my investment was around $11,000 to $12,000 to get me to this place, with a few mistakes.
Yep.
And that was like 4 months of building out and doing trial and error.
Okay.
So basically all of winter into January to April, it took me to get to a place where I could actually do my first production. I know the other route would be Kickstarter and crowdfunding. I think finding other friends in the fermentation community that are near you and trying to pair up on an idea that, I'm only using my trailer 2.5, 3 days out of the week, that somebody else could be utilizing that too. So you could, find other people that are just as inspired with whatever idea you pick and build those relationships. And I think partnering up with a pre-existing business like a farm, that you could maybe work out a deal or find some negotiation.
Yep.
They help you purchase the trailer and you create some mutual beneficial relationship. So those are my best ideas on how to get funding. And, you can definitely take the route of just selling tempeh out of your home without a legit setup and really sharing it with your friends and family. And you're not going to make a lot of money off of it, but you're going to get your product out there and see how people receive it. So starting there, I think, is very important for you to answer the questions too of, can I do this? Does this work for me? Yeah, so that to me is like the first step in entering the place of wanting to actually purchase something for your business.
Yep. Yeah. And were you intimidated when you started the build out process? Like, what were some of the highs and lows of that?
Yeah, I think what I'm finding now is in North Carolina, you have clearly pretty much 4 seasons. Every season's giving its own pros and cons. Starting out in the winter, my mind was really on that perspective and quickly transitioned into a very hot summer. So really, temperature has always been like a big theme and has been probably the more costly thing.
Temperature, you mean of inside?
Inside the trailer,
Yeah,
so that equipment doesn't break down, and then also in the incubator itself. Figuring out your fermentation chamber, if you're fermenting at low temperatures or really hot temperatures, in limited space will become the challenge of how do you creatively get appropriate space that can handle crazy seasons if you live in a place that has super hot summers or really cold winters. Drainage and water is another thing to keep in mind, and is something that I didn't naively approach. I just learned over time. That's a place of figuring out your drainage, figuring out a good water heater system. Also figuring out well water, or do you have public water, and if that water is even safe to use. Those are some examples that were troubleshooting situations that I learned through gradually opening up the trailer more and more.
So did you build this one first and then this one? Like, what is the difference between the two?
So I started out with the 6x12 trailer, the gray one.
Okay.
With the hopes that I could fit my fermentation chamber in that. months or so that probably wasn't going to be the long-term solution, and I quickly would grow out of it. And there was also space deficiencies that I hoped it was going to work, but I quickly learned that I needed a second trailer. So this trailer is 4x8, and that acts as a cooling and heating incubator.
Okay.
That I can put the tempeh in there, heat it at the temperature I want, and then also pull it down to save temperatures for packaging.
Okay.
And that was an investment I didn't plan on, but has afforded me great flexibility in really being able to do this the right way. Yeah, and that that took me from like April to June, I think, to truly feel like I had the trailers that are going to last me a while.
Yeah.
So I think that is something where you naturally get the thing you want to work out of, and you have a space of really playing around with what works. And the more you know, the less you're going to spend. But definitely factoring in that there's going to be a learning curve, especially if you don't have anyone to like mirror your business off of.
Right. Yeah. So it was really a matter of choosing like one thing to start with and then adjusting as you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was some like envisioning of where the homes for everything has to be. Like in that trailer, everything in there has a purpose and a place.
Yep.
The other thing to keep in mind is storage is such a big thing that I obviously can't store all my beans in my trailer.
Right.
If you start growing, packaging can change, and you end up acquiring a lot more stuff than you really thought you would. So storage units and storage containers I've reached out to. That's a huge resource. Food becomes an issue when you reach out to those places, but it can be a creative strategy to gain space. Working with farmers that have extra storage is something that I've done for my beans. So that's another way of just increasing your networking with your neighbors and other food-related businesses that are willing to help. So everything you see right here is not my whole business. I've definitely spread out into a few other spaces to manage all the things I actually need.
Yeah. And I am curious if there are like any like major regrets or things that you would just want people to know, like it totally did not work. And maybe that's different for their context. But.
I mean, not the biggest regret, but one would be, if you can envision the space perfectly, that's going to afford you time and money that you're otherwise going to be learning through error. So figuring out through an architect or people that can really measure out things and get a clear vision of what's going to be in that trailer or shed, for example, will save you so much time and energy. I unfortunately was not able to visit that many tempeh makers doing it. We visited one friend out in Oregon, reached out to a few others. I think COVID also impacted building relationships like that, but doing your research through other people that are doing the products that you want to do and trying to do site visits or trying to like stage or volunteer for a day. My leap of feeling like I could actually bring product to a store or farmer's market was only until after visiting a tempeh maker doing it. It answered more questions. It just sped up the process exponentially. So there is, if you're doing this by yourself, there is like not a loneliness factor, but you might be alone in this big endeavor.
Right.
So more ways you can figure out who your allies are. And utilizing them and being organized in that and being open and respectful in that process, I think will greatly enhance whatever you want to do. those are like the influencers of your business.
Yeah, it sounds like your whole, like the whole past year has been so relational and like relationship focused, and like the, yeah, the friend who helped you build it out, and the resources and mentors who helped with guidance, and yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah. To me, I'm trying to think of other things that stand out.
Yeah, yeah. And did you just find, like, were you just researching and, like, you would come to a website contact page and just straight up, like, reach out?
So really it's with Instagram right now that I find the greatest networking engine in the fermentation world. I think it's a big, expansive space with so many people that are, radically gracious that I don't, mirroring kitchens and some of the restaurants I've worked in and things of that nature, the compassion and the level of connection and, to me, sensitivity to people's loves and interests doesn't feel the same as it does in fermentation in that community.
Yeah.
That it's very rich. People have overextended themselves to do this either as their hobby, their business, or their like full-on lifestyle and ritual.
Yep.
I think a lot of people that I look up to seem to navigate their life through fermentation as their like vehicle to help the world. So, finding specific people in the Instagram community, finding books will lead you to those people. If you're watching this, you probably already know a lot of the names through community cultures and what he's doing. So yeah, I would say if you're watching this now, continue to watch the other voices for inspiration. I know Mark Phillips, Earth Cultures, will be speaking to community scale fermentation. I think that will also be another way to inspire yourself to learn how to bring fermentation into your home as a business or, an intense hobby.
Well, I've never seen inside your trailers. I would really love to check it out if we could.
Let's do it.
Cool.
Hey guys, this is my cribs. It's pretty simple. Hopefully you guys can see, but I have a small 3-bay sink that I've chosen a lot of equipment that can fit with that sink, but it is small. Everything has FPR panels, stainless steel floor that helps to be completely sanitized and cleanable. I have a drying shelf to dry everything, which the inspector demands. I have a Havoc system that does heating and cooling. This thing has been great, super energy efficient, and a great tool to have. Hand washing sink that you must have if you have any food operation going. Stainless steel shelving. My bags, backup beans that are off the ground. More beans in my buckets. And then probably my favorite tool that I've invested in is a company named Fidi, Fidi. It's on Amazon, but they have these 16-inch and I think up to 20-inch inductions, and it crates to where I can cook beans quite quickly, efficiently, and it can hold weight if you are doing a large pot, if you need to like boil water, if you're canning something. So that to me has been the best investment for an affordable price. I crack my beans in here as well, and then I have backup cooling in my other prep station, and some cooling devices to cool down the beans before I bag them and inoculate them, and as well an exhaust fan for evaporation and pulling out the steam from boiling beans. So everything you see in here is all the equipment I use to make my batches of tempeh. Extra storage is really just extra bags and random stuff for the farmers markets, but I've managed to completely fit the equipment that I need to make a batch of tempeh. And it also, if you guys want to come to the side here, this is an important part. Identifying your electricity in your home will also steer you into what you can or can't do. So I have a big enough sub panel that I can run this high amp wire with a sub panel that allows me not to overload the house electrical. And if you guys have more questions, feel free to reach out about that specifically. That is one area that to me was a big learning curve. This is my DIY fermenter. I have shelving to hold the beans. I have an exhaust fan up in the corner that rips out the heat when it's getting too hot. I have a cool butt set up with an AC that also will trigger on if it needs to cool down, but that's also where it will go down to refrigeration temperatures, so I can get 38 degrees on a really good night. A small heater that creates the right temperature, and then just Inkbird temperature controllers that you may be familiar with that help trigger the process between hot and cold. And then there's a top fan up here that's blowing up air to the top of the ceiling that helps just permeate the ambient temperatures and create even heat. Got some fresh packs of tempeh right now that will be getting pulled out shortly.
God, Taylor, that was so cool to see. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Yeah, so I feel like if you guys have any more questions about this operation, how I got my fermentation business on wheels, and also I think, you know, the community spiritual side of fermentation, I'd love to chat more. Feel free to reach out at bythebrook_tempeh. That's my hashtag or my tag on Instagram. My email is bythebrooktempe@gmail.com. If you want to send a personalized email, be happy to answer any questions.
Air high five.
Thanks, Case.
Hell yeah. By the brook!